Good evening, my name is Remington Lim, and today I'll be talking to you about the subject of my final term paper. So, the thesis of this final term paper is investigating the impacts of direct eye contact in interpersonal engagement, as well as its influence on interpersonal communication. So, as we all have learned in class, nonverbal communication refers to behaviors that convey meaning without the use of words. Now, the actions of nonverbal communication and cues are to manage conversation, express emotion, maintain relationships, form impressions, and influence others. Now, because eye contact is a subset of nonverbal communication, I will be also looking at uh, the role of eye contact in these areas as well. So, eye contact is known as the act of looking in another one's eyes and maintaining this gaze during interaction. So the rationale for choosing this topic was mainly the cultural duality that I was raised in. So although I was born and raised in America, I learned a lot of Asian traditions, and it was this juxtaposition between high and low context cultures that really spurred me to choose this topic. As we all know, America is a low context culture, so they rely less on nonverbal cues and more on explicit communication. On the other hand, high context cultures rely more on nonverbal cues and less on explicit communication. A lot of Asian cultures follow the pattern of high context cultures, and specifically for direct eye contact, though, a lot of Asian cultures recognize this technique and this behaviorism as a sign of defiance. So, this push and pull mechanism and dynamic between high and low context cultures is going to be looked at in this assignment, as well as I wanted to learn more about this technique and educate myself about its benefits so that maybe one day in the future I could bring out positive change and increase my own interpersonal communication through this action. So, in terms of the research, direct eye contact um, basically fulfilled all the typical actions of nonverbal communication in both the literature and in real life. So, in terms of the literature, I saw a lot of different studies, but I try to focus on the more relevant and interesting ones. But I also covered some of the more unorthodox ones that was kind of surprising to me. So, to start, in the interview setting, according to the University of Georgia, interviewees that use direct eye contact were found to receive more favorable hiring decisions, as well as um, be more suitable for positions that required more self confidence. Compared to those that did not use eye contact, interviewees that did were considered to have an outright advantage, which is a pretty strong conclusion. And in terms of the idea of self confidence and self esteem, this is a recurring concept throughout this paper and is also one that I experienced myself in my personal experiments. So I'll be discussing that later on. Moving past the impressions, eye contact also affects credibility. Um, According to the communication scholar Beebe, it was noted that as a speaker generated more eye contact, there was an increased perception of that speaker's credibility in the audience. Now, although we can't ignore the other influences of nonverbal cues, we simply cannot ignore the influence of direct eye contact either on the same token. Um, so, in terms of biology, according to Bielefeld University in Germany, it was found that eye contact was a key part of developing and maintaining the maternal infant bond, as well as it was crucial to the proper development of the infant. This is because mothers and infants hold a lot of mutual gaze, and when you couple this with postural movements of the head and body, this kind of prepares the infant for to become a more equipped member um, in terms of being individual ready for different social actions in society. Finally, a study in Pakistan in the English learning classroom showed the impact of eye contact in the classroom. So, teachers that used eye contact and other nonverbal cues, it was found that that teacher had higher self esteem, more enthusiasm, and greater communication skills, while the students were deemed more motivated to learn things. This study was important for two reasons. One, because um, we're all students in a communications course, so this is relevant to us as students. And also, two, because this study kind of mirrored the outcome of what I want this final term project to be, and the fact that they noticed that there was a dire need to introduce nonverbal communication in mainstream education, and they also noticed that a lack of proper use of eye contact was the cause of many of these gaps. So, similar to this study, I wanted to have this realization and also reap the benefits of employing this technique in and out of the classroom. Um, so, next comes the personal experiments that I conducted. I conducted three with one with my parents, one with my peers, and one with my friends. So these personal experiments kind of afforded me insights that I couldn't really feel until I experienced them myself. So it supplemented the literature, which was kind of nice. The first experiment included my parents. So because I'm in school right now, I contact them via FaceTime, which is a video chatting app. And usually through the app, I would have the call open and have my phone face down while doing something such as homework. Um, I would occasionally look at the screen and make eye contact, but it was mostly just listening and responding while not looking at the screen. So to change this, I actually held the phone and maintained eye contact with my parents throughout the whole call. And as a result of this, they first noticed the behavior and called me out on it, which is pretty funny. And two, there was an increased flow of the conversation. I think this was due to a better ability for on my part to gauge the general vibe of the conversation from their output and my output, and this enabled me to give better real-time feedback to improve the flow of the conversation. Also, I would say there was an increased synergy between both me and my parents because I was much more involved in the actual conversation. Next came the experiment with my peers. So usually, this is more of like a walk and talk scenario as we all walk together towards class, either through the hallways or outside. So I try to increase eye contact in this situation, which is normally we just make infrequent eye contact as we're walking side by side, but I try to increase eye contact, and I found that as with any other technique, um, in communication, there's a time and place for everything. So I learned this the hard way that there's a context dependent factor for eye contact. And when people have high priorities, such as focusing on what's going on around them, they're not as inclined to make eye contact. So even though I wanted to make eye contact, most of this action was one-sided. So I didn't really learn much from this part of the experiment. Finally, the last experiment was with my friends over a meal. So I tried to increase the eye contact during the whole interaction. And the results were similar to the first experiment in that I noticed an increased flow of the conversation and a deeper sense of intimacy between the two of us. I'm not sure the real reason behind this, but I would say when there's a reciprocated gaze that both parties are heavily invested in, there's just a deeper connection between the two. And my friends actually um, agreed with me when I asked them about this after the experiment, which is kind of interesting as well. So, in conclusion, I learned a lot about this technique, obviously, but also I learned that through direct eye contact, the quality of our conversations can be improved, as well as my own self esteem was boosted because I was able to have deeper conversations with people that matter to me and have those feelings reciprocated back to me, both in the form of eye contact and the quality of conversation. I also know what needs to be done by practicing this technique more so that I become more comfortable with it. Overall, I'm just grateful to learn more about this essential skill of communication as well as learning to see how it affected my own life and character. Thank you.